Alright, so this is Blender. When you first open it, you'll come across this window. Depending on the type of Blender you have open, it'll change the picture. It's nothing too much to worry about. It has your recent files in here and everything. Just to get rid of it, you can click out of it. I have this over here, my list of like my button presses and everything. That way you'll be able to see everything that I am typing and pressing and all that stuff. So what I'm going to do is delete this cube because we don't need it. And these, the camera and light and the tree, which are these two things, they're really unnecessary when you're doing 3D printing. You really only need these for like designing, like just graphical designing. So I'm just going to delete those, simple delete. The next thing we want to do is we want to go to units, and it'll by default be in metric, and we want to make sure that the length is millimeters. That will sync it up to the printer, since 3D printers use millimeters. Next thing we want to do, a very useful tool, something pretty much necessary for Blender if you're going to be doing 3D printing, is make sure you go to Edit, down to Preferences, and then you go to Add-ons, and if you type in 3D, you'll get a Mesh 3D Print Toolbox. Make sure that is checked on. All right, then you can close that out, and you'll see what that toolbox does later. It'll be important later, but for right now we can ignore it. So next I'm going to go File, Import, STL, and I'll go to the downloads, and this is the part that you sent me. So this is the Photogrammetry object. Now, I'll teach you a few things about Blender since this will be your first time using it. If you hit Tab, you'll be able to open up and edit all the different vertices of the object that you're looking at. There are a few things on this object that I noticed need fixed, so I definitely want to walk you through those a little bit, but I'm not going to do all of them just for time's sake. If you grab any of these vertices, within the object and hit L, it'll grab everything that is attached to those. Now what that means is you can see that there are black dots right there and black dots up there. We don't want that. That'll cause weird stuff when you're trying to print and do the different operations. So we'll just delete those. And I noticed a few other geometry things in this object, like for instance these weird strings that come off. You don't want these in there. It'll cause really weird issues when you go and try to solidify it and basically give it the depth. So what you can do is you can just grab all of that and X for delete vertices. And one other thing here is you can see if you grab a vertice and shift click any other vertices, it'll select all these different ones. However, if you grab one and control click farther away, it'll grab everything in between those vertices. So that's nice. So what I'm going to do is grab this and control click this issue, and I'll shift control click, so for everything here, all of this. This will just make it easier for cleaning up and everything. Delete vertices. So I'm not going to spend too much time fixing this one, but you probably want to come through and delete all these extra strings that basically come off of this. To make it easier, you can also hit Alt-Z, and that'll make your part transparent. That'll allow you to select parts through objects, so you can see it selected between this and over here, whereas if I just use solid and I select like this, it'll only select that side. So Alt-Z is nice for transparency. And then you want to make sure that you have this selected. Go down to the wrench icon. This will be your modifiers properties toolbar. And you go add modifier. Probably about 90% of these operations you won't ever use in 3D printing. Again, Blender is more of a graphics design program with some 3D print capabilities, which is awesome. So what you want here is, again, you want this selected, go to add modifier, solidify. And then you can see if you grab your thickness bar, you can drag it and it'll give your object different thicknesses. Right? So negative will be forward, positively backward. So 2 millimeters is going to be a little bit thin here. As you can see, we're at 200 millimeters, and it's honestly probably what you want here. That's probably just because the scale is off, but you'll see it's not going to make too much of a difference later. Honestly, you can scale it in Cura at the very end if you really need to. So after you're satisfied with your thickness, so we'll go something like that. Then you can make sure that it has fill on. If you don't have fill on, then you can see it'll only basically offset the walls. So if you put fill on, it'll make sure that you have an entire solid object. And then you can go down here to the drop down arrow and click apply. So now your object has depth to it, it has thickness, it'll be able to print. One other thing we want to do now is if you hit N, it'll open up these different toolbars on the side, view, tool, and item. And then since we went to preferences earlier and added the 3D print toolkit, we can also go to this. This is very useful whenever you're going to print anything from Blender or attempt to print anything from Blender. First thing you want to do is check all, and after it runs its whole program for any objects that are within the viewport, it will give us a feedback saying here are any issues that it found. So for one, it found 22 non-manifold edges. This basically just means that there are random edges that are joined that shouldn't be joined, that in a graphic design program they can physically be done, well, they can be done, whereas in real life these kinds of shapes would be impossible to be actually formed, such as, say you have a cube that's missing a face. Well, now you just have 5 sides all together that are sharing edges, but they don't have any width to them. It's not a solid object. That's a non-manifold object. So what we want to do for this one, we go down to cleanup, and we just simply click make manifold. That'll take everything that's in here and clean it all up, and we can check all again. And we want to make sure that it feeds back with 0 non-manifold edges. Alright, that's what we want. Next thing we want is export, and then you can just choose in the file where you want to go to. So I'm going to just put it to my downloads because that's where I'm keeping this. And then export. Oh, one thing I'll say is you have to make sure that this is selected. If you do what I just did, where you are out of it and you just click export, then when you try to open it in Cura, it won't give you the file. It'll be inaccessible. It'll just have an error. Whereas make sure you actually have it selected, then export. And that will actually export the model that you need. So now we can open it up here, and that is what you want. So this will be exactly what you want, and you can see in Cura that it actually has depth to it. It has thickness, and that is what Cura likes to see. So at this point, I made sure all my supports are off. Through here, this is what I was telling you before, through Facebook. Let's see, where's Shell? Yeah, Shell right here. Print thin walls. This option is what you would want selected for what I thought was happening. But since this is photogrammetry, it literally only had one thin layer, and 3D printers can't do that. So you just had to do this extra stuff with the Blender, give it some depth, and then it should print nicely. So now it says 2 hours, 8 minutes. If we check it, it looks like it'll mostly print right, except I do see a few issues here. So in this case, we would just want to go back to Blender and adjust the thickness. And as a matter of fact, when I said to apply the modifier, you can also just leave it, don't apply the modifier, and that way when you use it, you can continue to adjust what you're doing with it, right? You don't have to apply it in order for it to make an effect. So you can just leave it like that. So yeah, don't apply that. That way you can adjust it and fix anything like this. This is a problem. But yeah, that should fix or be what you need. Also, I'm noticing here that it doesn't have a whole flat bottom here. So what you can do is if you actually just go, if you're in Cura and you just drop it a little bit, slice it, it will cut everything below the build plate off, and it'll actually give you a flat bottom. Now I can tell you as well that this being really thin is going to have problems printing. So one of the things you'll want to do in order to print this properly is go down to build plate adhesion, and make sure you turn on brim. And what this will do, once it slices, you'll see, it adds surface area around the bottom of the part. This might not even be enough. You might want to increase the number of brims here. So like this, I have 16 brim line. You might want to adjust it to maybe 25 since this is a taller part. It just adds surface area so that it can stick to the bed plate a little bit easier. So yeah, that's pretty much what you need to do. Let me know if you have any other questions.